Welcome to the CEO's Heart for Service, where leaders of exceptional B2B businesses work together to answer this question: how do you scale your services without compromising your client experience or the core values that drive them? I'm your host, Matt Wolfe. Join us as B2B leaders share hard-won insights and field-tested strategies for the tightrope walk between integrity and growth. We'll find our balance and the way forward together. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the CEO's Heart for Service. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about today's conversation, what you're about to hear. But real quick, I'm Matt Wolfe, a partner at Brand 3, and this is Sarah Pattisall, one of our brilliant brand strategists at Brand 3. Hi, Sarah.
Hello, everybody. I am also thrilled about this conversation you all are about to listen to. I've been trying to think about what to say about it because there is so much I could say, but I keep coming back to this idea of selfless selling, which sounds like a complete oxymoron until you hear Dusty Holcomb speak. And then you can see how you can bring this sense of selflessness and humbleness to growing and scaling a company that will completely transform your approach to leadership. That's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's really true, Sarah. The idea of service just resonates in his DNA. We're talking today to Dusty Holcomb, the CEO of the Arcqus Group, and just, yeah, the idea of service leads everything he does, even down to, another thing that I was really struck with was how much he talked about listening and asking questions of people. What is it he's going to say in a minute here? He asks himself all the time, am I saying something that sounds smart or something that helps the person I'm working with? He's so focused on discovering what people truly need instead of it's so easy to fall into the trap of being prescriptive or leaning on our formulas or leaning on the things that feel safe and tried and true to us because we know that works. But Dusty's not afraid to just sort of jump in there and see where the journey takes him with people, and it's clearly way more effective.
And I'm just thrilled for anybody listening to this podcast because I promise you that you are going to walk away from it just feeling lighter and more hopeful and energized and inspired, which is an important word, and you will learn why.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's clear that this is how he makes his clients feel, right? I feel like we were his clients for about an hour, and we left feeling better off. And so, man, stick around, because if you're a leader looking for guidance, boy, I would just make sure you listen to this conversation. So let's go there now, and we're going to introduce you to Dusty Holcomb. Okay, here we are, Dusty. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. I had so much fun meeting you the other day. I've been looking forward to this. Welcome to the show.
I'm delighted to be here, and I cannot wait to see where this conversation goes. And if it's half as good as the conversation we had the other day, I know I'm in for a fun ride.
Agreed. I'm right there with you. Okay, so here's where we like to start. This is just a fun question, but we're going to talk a lot about scaling services. We work with B2B services, which are, I call them high stakes, high trust. Finance, tech. People are being asked to entrust a service provider with this critical, super important part of their business and who they are. And the only way that we really bridge that ultimately is by meeting the human behind the brand, right? By having we know that we sell those things through relationships and trust. What we do is we try and create those moments of relationship and trust and human connection earlier in the process and in the marketing journey. But all of that to say is we like to get to know the human behind the brand as well as talking about business stuff on the podcast. So first things first, Dusty, you who are CEO of the Arcqus Group, leading this amazing leadership consulting and training service. This is probably not where you saw yourself landing when you were growing up. So when you were a kid, what did you want to be? Where did you think life was going to take you?
Well, if I'm being really transparent and honest, my dreams at 9 years old were either to be a cowboy or a game warden. And I don't think I'm doing either of those things, but I don't think I've actually drifted that far, because when you start talking about leading other humans and trying to get, things to go the right direction and get everybody aligned to the vision. It's the same thing as, getting cows to go the right way. And it's the same thing as trying to make sure that, nobody's breaking game laws. So maybe the parallel's not that far apart, but that's what I wanted to be when I was growing up. Is I wanted to be a cowboy, I wanted to be a game warden, I wanted to be out on a horse doing something fun. And actually, I think I get to do it every day and I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I can see that.
Well, with a name like Dusty, like it was predestined that I was going to be, a cowboy of some sort.
Yeah. See, I grew up on a farm, so we got some things in common there.
Yeah, you were given the cowboy blessing from the get-go.
I was.
That's amazing. Well, and when in the space that you're in, we're way past like herding cows. We're herding cats. This is this is a whole different world we're talking about. But to be in the space that you're in, and I know, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this stuff. I know you've got a new book you're working on. You've always got new partnerships, new things you're rolling out. There's a Wild West sense to what you're doing, right? To keep exploring. It's just a different frontier. But you could have worn the cowboy hat if you wanted.
I've got one, but I'll leave it off for now. It covers up my good hair.
Yeah, you and me both.
I'll take your cowboy hats.
Dusty, I'd like to give the audience a sense of your background a little bit. So today, what's a little different, just for the audience sake, a lot of times we're talking to someone whose career has been largely focused on one business. In your case, you're now running, like we said, the Arcqus Group leadership consulting firm. But before that, you have some incredible experience as a CEO leading other organizations through scaling and growth and change. And so for anyone who's new here, what we do is we explore the theme of as you scale any company. And if you are someone who has a heart for service and cares about the people who you serve, you're going to be concerned about how do I continue to take good care of these people as I scale, as I grow. You're going to be haunted by the question, how do I maintain the same quality of service, the core values, everything that makes us special. So it's really fun that we get to explore that theme throughout your life experience today. But I'm going to stop talking, and I would love for you to just share a little bit of your journey and how you got here.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that. And, one of the things I liked so much, from our very first conversation is like, we're not talking just about growing businesses and scaling and all those things. We're talking about the more principled and purposeful meaning of what we do. I think those growing a business, scaling a business, those are actually vehicles to creating impact and legacy. And having a heart for service is really the embodiment of that. So just kudos to you for bringing that message out there. And honestly, that has been really my purpose and passion my entire career. I had the very distinct privilege of getting tucked under the wing of a retired colonel at age 20. And I was promoted into a call center third shift supervisor role where I was responsible for 12 other people, 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. And, I was desperate for growth. I was desperate to do more. And what I didn't really realize, and what Greg helped me understand, was that leadership wasn't about me. In fact, that's the most principled lesson and important leadership lesson I've ever learned. And it has formed and reformed everything I know and think about serving others, is that it's not about me. And when you have a heart for service, you are first and foremost saying, it isn't about me. I'm not going to be a person who seeks to extract maximal value from all those around me. But instead, I'm going to contribute and create value for those around me, and understanding that when I do that, and this is what I find so fun about this work, when I do that, I actually create a compound effect, because I have so many people who are receiving value, who then go create value, who then do it again and again and again. And extracting value is a linear equation. Creating value is an exponential equation. And so for me, that moment of being taught that leadership is not about me has really framed everything I've done. I've gotten to do some really cool things that we can get into, to include like like the first real experience as an executive where I was 23 years old and hired to relocate a call center and go to a new small town, 400 miles away from the corporate office, and hire everybody and install the culture and build the organization, 350 people. There's no moment there that you must say that either the people who hired me were drunk or dumb because they hired a 23-year-old kid to go do this.
Mm-hmm.
But it was so exciting because it was an opportunity for me to go, and here's the culture that we can create. And we can create a service-oriented culture because we were a 24/7, 365 emergency response call center, and we could really focus on doing the right thing. So that's me. My heart has always been in serving others. What I had done as a vehicle to do that has been leadership roles to include president, CEO, CMO, scaler of businesses, startup guy. But it's always been about achieving my personal mission statement, which is to enable and empower the success of others. Because when we do that, we create this massive compound effect that has exponential capability.
Now, I got a follow-up question for you, Dusty. Well, first off, everything you said there was just so eloquent and also incredible to hear. I'm sure Matt feels how I do right now with just how deeply that resonates with us and what we're about. And my follow-up question for you there is I know that in the context of leadership, you are really big on inspiring people
Hmm.
and the role of inspiration. And given that you've worked in some different industries and places and with different styles of teams, how does your leadership and how you inspire and your approach to a heart for service change, if ever, based on the industry or the team? And how do you make those calls?
Well, for me, I have to kind of step back a bit and go, what's a first principle belief here? And the first principle belief that I have is that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. John
Mhm.
Maxwell said that. And so when we're talking about inspiration, what we're really talking about is helping people see what isn't yet created and what isn't yet possible. And sometimes that's personal inspiration, sometimes it's team inspiration, sometimes it's simply the ability to connect the dots from where we are to where we want to be. And what I have found in my work with leaders and leadership teams is that we have to make sure that our team members, those we serve, have that clear vision, because once they do, they can connect the dots. And they don't always have that, right? We don't always walk into a room and go, oh, I know exactly where we're going and how it matters and how I fit into this thing. And so we have to have questions. And so for me personally, I have to know that my job is not here to tell people what to do. My job is to be a person of influence. And how I create that influence is by ensuring I ask the right questions and deeply listen and care to understand who they are so that I can connect the dots for them to where we're going as an organization. I think that that is one of the most powerful and yet underdone leadership traits out there. I've got a 5-question framework I'm always talking about with the CEOs I work with. And the fourth question in this framework is, where do I fit in? And that's the leader's job. And so when we're talking about inspiration, what we're really talking about at a simple level is the ability to connect dots from where a person is to
Yeah.
where they want to be.
Yeah, I can see how that would completely change, the perspective of a team, right? From, hey, I'm telling you to get this task done to, hey, here's the big picture that we are all working towards and the magic that we're going to make. And here's what we need to do together to make it happen.
Yeah. And then you get to do that next thing, which is, what do you think? How do you fit into this?
Yeah.
How can you contribute? What am I missing? I think like inspiration, like there's inspirational speakers and rah-rah stuff, and that's good. But what we're really talking is about getting someone to behave differently when the leader's not in the room. I think that's when inspiration lands, when people make choices. And I'm a huge believer in the power of choice and the power of agency. And maybe I'm a little biased because right now I'm just rereading my favorite book. And every year, every summer, I reread Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And I do it as a reminder to myself of the power of agency. And I think that inspiration is not something we do to people. It's something that we unlock within people. And it's just a different mindset of how we show up as a leader.
And what I hear and what you're saying too is you're actually taking them beyond inspiration to ownership, and another way to say agency, I guess, but you're helping them own they're a part of it. And yeah, I think you're right. That's the biggest thing that gets missed is people need to know why they're doing a thing. The clients need to know why we're doing a thing and how it's going to help them, but the team needs to know why they're being asked to do a thing. And once they do, they can really own that and have a sense of mission. That's what we see it from the viewpoint of story. We talk a lot about that a strong brand story, which is about telling the right story to the right people. It's the story of a relationship between who the business is and who their ideal client is. And it's going to focus marketing and make it more effective, but it doesn't stop there. It also helps the sales team tell a more powerful story, tell the same story as marketing and accelerate the sales process. It helps anyone involved in client experience
Connecting all the dots.
and it helps the client experience team, anyone involved in that, connect the dots to, okay, this is the story we tell. How do we make that real? How do we live into that promise and elevate what we're doing now? And ultimately, it wraps the whole thing. To us, it's a catalyst for culture. And it's funny that the way that you're saying it too is I always explain to people, if you have a great brand story, it's going to help everyone in your organization understand who you serve, the difference that you make for them, and why you're doing what you're doing. It is a source of inspiration.
Yeah, it is. I want to jump in there because it's not only a source for inspiration. And I love that you focus on story, because I think story is so powerful because it translates words into behaviors. And what people don't, people are actors against a defined behavioral outcome. And when we tell great stories, we help people understand what beautiful looks like, what great looks like. They get to go do that. And, we need everybody working together. We need, the presence of the leader to be present when they're not present, like when they're not there in the room. And what I like about it is when we get everyone engaged in the stories, whether it's to the customer or to the internal team or wherever that may be, what we're really doing, and when we create these dots that are connected, is we're giving the person who has the most context about the problem, the customer, or the opportunity, the information they need to make the best possible decision in alignment with the goals of the organization. And when that happens, what we're really getting is discretionary effort. We're unlocking discretionary effort. We're moving people from being transactional providers of an outcome to personally invested conveyors of value. I like to think of it as we move people from being mercenaries hired to do a task to missionaries out to evangelize a mission. And I think the story helps bring that to life.
That's so good. And I love that, mercenary to missionary. And what story does is it helps people see themselves as part of a thing, right? They are part of a narrative, which is so different than giving them information. I'm a preacher's kid. I was raised in a Methodist church. My dad was a pastor for 37 years. I heard a lot of sermons. And then I had a little stint in ministry as well too. So I heard a lot more sermons there. And then I've been in theater my whole life. I've been a storyteller. And what I learned, one really important thing is you can let a pastor go, you can let a CEO go, right? And talk for half an hour, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever they want to do. But the thing that people will remember and hold on to is the story, is the narrative. And that will sink into their hearts and live there in a way that no mission statement, these are important things, mission statement, value statements, all those things are important. But the story just fuels a sense of, to your point, purpose, belonging, and mission in a way that nothing else can.
Yeah, it's interesting how it really all comes back to how those stories that we tell and that we hear about ourselves and that we tell others and that we use to inspire, it all comes back to how it makes you feel. Like, what does being a part of that story make you feel? And if it makes you feel part of the mission.
It's funny you said that, the word mission. We've started doing that internally on our kickoffs for a new project. The first thing we do now is we talk about what's the mission for this project. And so I did one the other day, and it's a great example. The mission was twofold for this new client. They have a legacy transition from father to son and daughter that we're responsible to help make successful in the way that we've stepped into their lives. So it's like, guys, they've got 17 years under their belt and they want to get a lot more. They want to make a successful exit, leave a legacy for their family. We're here to back them up. At the same time, they have a mission where they, make a long story short, they literally have the capacity to help prevent many smaller universities and colleges from closing right now, which is like an epidemic. so we can back them up in helping more schools and making sure all the people whose livelihoods and futures depend on that succeed. So we start there, and so that our team knows what story they're a part of, and then we, go from there.
And just hearing you say it again, I'm more excited again about the account. I'm like, yes, I can't wait to help this client and serve them the best I can.
It has meaning beyond
Yeah.
the transaction. No, it has meaning beyond that
Exactly.
transaction. And then
Mhm.
they're signing up for something, not just here to provide a transactional element.
Yeah. Okay, so back to the stuff that you've done, Dusty. I'm curious. A question we like to ask, and so again, you've seen this from a lot of different perspectives, is when we talk about a heart for service, service is the heart of everything you're talking about. What does it mean to deliver exceptional service in the environment you're in now? If you think of the Arcqus Group and where you're at now, what does it mean to you right now?
It's ultimately around understanding how you create value. I love that you used the word mission a minute ago because, oftentimes we think of mission statements or, it's this ethereal thing of some vague promise of
Yeah.
what we're trying to create. And I like to think of mission as the embodiment of the promise I'm making to my customer about the value I'm going to create. And so when I make it and think about it that way, and I think about the work that I do today at a mission level and the value that we create for our clients, what it means for me is I need to show up in a way that serves that leader in achieving their mission. My mission is to ensure they're successful. The mission of the work we do is to ensure that leaders have greater clarity so they can align their teams and they can execute at a higher level. And so I show up personally, and maybe I've done this my entire career, but with this mindset of how can I create value? One of my favorite models, and I'm a models thinker. I'm always got these ideas that I'm putting into frameworks, is this cost, price, value triangle, where we're trying always to shove the value as far away as we can from a cost line so that we can create more opportunity for growth for the person that we're serving more. And then therefore we can actually get more margin for our business. But we always have to be seeking this way of creating more value. So it can be as simple as asking the right question, which is about them to unlock something, or it can be a challenging statement. I'll work with CEOs and executive teams, and sometimes what they need is that tough question delivered out of a place of serving that helps them see what they can't otherwise see because you're too close to the problem or too close to the situation. So I'll give you a story. I'm working with a leadership team, a CEO and her team, and I typically work with leaders and leadership teams when they're at inflection points of growth. They are seeking to get from where they are to where they want to be, and we're not talking about 10% growth. We're like, hey, we have a 3-year vision, and we're trying to double the business over this next 3-year period. How do we get there? And so I will come in there and help them, basically see what it is that's holding them back and getting in the way. I'm not there to create this massive value. I'm not there to tell people what to do, but it's really to help them distill and focus on the most important thing. And so before I speak, will often ask myself this question: is what I'm about to say about proving anything about who I am, or is it about unlocking who they could be or unlocking some blocker for them that is preventing them from getting where they want to be? And so it's a quick thing, but it goes back to that power of choice and of agency. In between a stimulus and a response, we have choice. So I often will just catch myself going, am I saying something to sound smart, or am I saying something that helps them act and show up in a more effective way? So I've got this leadership team, and they are working through some really interesting growth opportunities in a high growth business, transformational change. They're looking to 10x their business over the next few years. And it's all possible, but it wasn't possible the way they were thinking. They were stuck in the paradigm of this is what it's going to take to do it. And we're just going to linearly stack things on. And what we needed to step back and say is, I asked them is, what about it, the way you are showing up right now, or anyone on this team is showing up, could be hindering our ability to get there? And so let's start talking about symptoms of behavior that could be slowing us down. And we're not throwing rocks at each other. We're throwing rocks at the problem, the symptoms. And that actually allowed them to go from a 10-year plan to a 3-year plan to achieve that same 10x growth mindset. But we just attacked the actual blockers. And again, it wasn't about me being smart. I didn't do anything. I just asked them the right question at the right time.
I love that. I don't want to miss that there's a really important theme going on here, right? Of asking questions first, of seeking the real story of what's going on first. It's so easy, especially in this service provider space that we're in, consulting space that we're in, to be prescriptive instead of collaborative, to jump in with solutions instead of taking the approach that you're taking.
Well, I'm about to jump in there because I think that's so powerful, especially when you're in thought leadership business or service-oriented businesses. You are the expert at what you do, but the customer is the expert at their customer's problem, and you're there to help them solve that part of their business model. That means you have to be very curious about what the problem is that they're trying to solve for their customer, so you can make sure that your solution as an expert actually fits their problem. At least that's my opinion. I've found sometimes, what I know isn't true in every situation. So I need to make sure I'm asking good questions to understand how it's going to apply for that customer and what they need to solve.
I'm right there with you. And I would argue that it's applicable in way more situations than we're probably giving ourselves credit for, right? Even like finances, I think, is a good example. CPA, wealth manager, financial advisor, M&A, whatever. They come in and they're like, well, this is how it works. Well, does it for this company because of what they know and what they're trying to accomplish and what they bring to the table? Same thing with tech. This is how we should do tech for a business like yours. Well, is it for that context? And that I wrote down really fast when you said this. Am I saying something that sounds smart or something that helps them? I'm going to put that on a big damn Post-it somewhere in my office.
I need that as well in my life more.
Well, I may have arrived at that pearl of wisdom because I smashed my head into the wall of danger a few times getting there.
Yeah, all of these things are, these are hard-won lessons, right, that we get to. As long as we're talking about hard-won lessons, right? Theme of the podcast, how do we scale a service-based business for people who have a heart of service, care deeply about the people they serve? How do we do that and maintain the quality of service? We want to capture some stories either from you've seen a lot through the Arcqus Group. You've seen a lot in your own experience where you've seen some real challenges in that of trying to hold on to who they are and how they serve as they grow.
Yeah, I have. And so I'll pick a story from earlier in my career. I was working in automotive, so automotive repair. And when you have just a few locations, you can personally invest in every person to ensure that, I could go visit all the stores when we had 4 locations and knew everybody by name and talk to them about how, we were showing up as a business and what we cared about and all those things. But as we grew and we started getting more and more and more and more organizations or more locations, my personal ability to influence the behavior of the person closest to the customer diminished. And so what I then had to think about was, hey, who are the people that I can influence and impact that have that same capability of influence, right? When I could go see every location and know every person, I didn't need to have a ring of influence beyond the front line. But as organizations scale, what leaders have to do is figure out, well, the time I was investing in creating the behavior I wanted by connecting it with that person who delivers, I now need to focus my effort and my energy on the person who has that same degree of influence, and it's the leadership cadre. So I especially in locations or organizations where you have multiple locations, the bigger the organization gets, the more time you need to spend with the mid-level manager and that frontline leader to make sure that they understand how their work connects the dots, because it's their job to make sure that that frontline person who's in front of the customer, who's in front of the opportunity, knows how much the company cares, knows how much the leader cares, and all those things. So I personally experienced that growth challenge And I was benefited by having been in very large groups, so like call center I mentioned earlier, but it was still hard, right? It's still very hard to go from, hey, 40 people, 4 locations to 40 locations with 400 people. How do you create cultural change? How do you create cultural continuity and maintain that service quality? And so what we did, and what I did, is I've spent more and more time with my leadership team talking about what great looked like, capturing people doing the right thing, celebrating more, because I needed the stories to be bigger. I needed the stories to be bolder. And I needed to know what great looked like so that when I did get out in the field, I could make a personal commitment to swing by and say, hey, Matt, you may not believe this, but last week I heard about what you did for Miss Smith when she came in with her car, and like that blew me away. Now, here's a guy who's now in an organization of 400 or 4,000. He's like, how the heck does the CEO know about this? It's because we had a culture of listening to, capturing those stories, and reinforcing them over and over and over again. Now, I smashed my head into the wall a few times along the way on this, because what I learned, and it's actually a lesson from Greg very early in my career, is never delegate hiring the leaders. Like that, as you grow and scale, your effort and energy has to go into hiring the leaders and ensuring that they know what great looks like. And I did that for a while. I actually took my eye off that ball. I didn't personally hire all the leaders, or I didn't personally get involved in the interview process. And I realized that no, I needed to spend more time there. So it became I didn't make the hiring decision about the person, but I made sure they got 45 minutes with me so they could get a culture and values injection of what great looked like in our organization before they came on board. And I'll give you an example. I would personally tell every leader in the organization, this is what we believe. This is how we show up. If this is who you are all in on acting in this way and caring for people and caring about customer service, you will succeed wonderfully here. But if you don't, I want you to know before you take this job, you're going to run into a buzzsaw and it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I'm really curious about then is you seem like somebody who has just had all of these experiences, who have taught you so much about leadership and how to coach others in leadership. And I'm assuming that so much of what you have learned has become the foundation for the leadership operating system. And I'm wondering if you could share a bit more about that and the kind of lessons that informed what you've built for others to use.
Sure. So let me say this. In leadership and in management, what we often do is we focus on execution gaps. We are really good at seeing where what we want to have accomplished isn't being done, and then we go to try to fix it. We say, hey, this isn't meeting my expectation. I need to go do this differently. And what I have learned, and what I would argue, is that we as leaders actually need to do a better job of stepping back and going, have we created clarity? Are we really clear on where we're going, what great looks like, and how to do that? And many times I've found when the leaders I work with, there's not clarity. Like, I think I know what I want. No. If you think you know what you want and you're expecting someone else to read your mind and do it that way, you don't have clarity. You have to have such clarity so that you can communicate it, you can cast it out, and then you align people. So when I think of a leadership operating system, the first place I go is we're not worried about execution. Executions is an outcome of the inputs that we need before that. And those are creation of clarity of expectations, and the alignment of effort, the alignment of thinking. So how do we create clarity, build alignment, enable execution? That's what gives us results. So the leadership operating system is the place and space to step back, make sure we know what good looks like, and then build and align our teams to do that, why it matters. That's the dot connecting stuff. And yes, I've had a lot of experience doing that, but that's the process of thinking that allows you to scale. It allows you to grow. It allows you to do these 10x jumps. You have to be crystal clear first. You have to build the alignment with your people. And when you do that, and you do that well, and you do it as a virtuous renewing cycle, what you get is extraordinary results.
we're speaking to the same problem from different angles. In terms of brand story, marketing, clarity is just everything. And it's almost impossible to be clear from the inside without an outside perspective to come in and help you figure out how to tell the story of who you serve and the difference you make in a way that they can hear it, in a way that speaks their language, starting with speaking the language of story and then with the specifics of, whatever the context is. But yeah, it's so important to growth from every front.
So, in bringing up clarity, I'm curious what that moment was in your life that made you realize how important clarity was. What happened in the past that made that an important lesson to stick with you as big as it is today?
The first thing that comes to my mind was when I was 23 and had a team member who had the courage and the stamina to walk up to me after a Monday morning staff meeting and go, "Hey, Dusty, you're a jack, you know what? Would you like to know more?" And I'm running, this is the call center I was running. And fortunately, it may be for whatever reason, I had enough smarts or sense to go, "Well, that's really interesting. I'd love to learn more. Tell me more." And the epiphany that he brought to my mind was I was so driven and I was so focused on results and I was so focused on process that we had a 7:30 a.m. Monday morning staff meeting for my leadership team. And at 7:31, I locked the door. And we went right into reports and all the stuff. Now, I cared deeply about people, but I didn't have real understanding of how my behaviors were impacting others. And this person had the courage to say, "Hey, Dusty, you're a jack, you know what? And here's why I think that. Here's what you need to know." And it gave me this epiphany and this clarity of I am demonstrating behaviors that are inconsistent with my beliefs. I need to step back and I need to understand, because what he told me, and this is where I started learning about behavioral assessments like DISC and things like that. I'm a high D. Is that not everybody wants to absorb information the way I do or get into it the way I did. Some people wanted to have a conversation around, "How was your weekend? What'd you do?" I wanted to go right to numbers and right to the decisions. And so that started giving me clarity around, and about me, I need to really think more about this. I need to have awareness. And so that was probably the very first thing. It's the first thing that comes to mind is that mindset of somebody hit me in the face with a message I needed to hear. And it allowed me to create clarity in leadership so that I could then align my actions to my beliefs. And actually, that's a lot of the work we do today with executives and executive teams is we do a process of helping them get really clear on their own leadership playbook, their own leadership values, so that they can communicate those to their team so that their team can be more effective. And we can walk through that. But that was my first one. And fortunately, somebody was very courageous and I was smart enough not to react poorly.
I really love how you told that story. And one thing that you said that I think really stands out is that your actions were inconsistent with your values when it came to leadership and how you treat others. And I think it can be easy for people to fall into that trap, especially when we're so passionate about what we do. But that is really important in creating clarity as a leader.
Yeah, it's tremendously important. And like I always tell folks, and I've had the benefit of having an executive coach for over 20 years, and I still have a coach, right? I still actually have two coaches. Maybe I need a lot of help. And it's because of this idea that you cannot read the label from inside the jar. You can't see your own blind spots. You can't see the issues, and you need people to help you navigate that. And sometimes you just have to have somebody who's courageous and able to let you step back and see those things. And that's when you get those moments of clarity. That's when you get those epiphanies. You just can't see it. You really can't see it for yourself.
I don't think I've ever heard of an approach that was equally aggressive and respectful at the same time, like what that fella did.
Yeah.
You're a real jack. You know what? Would you like to know more? It's my favorite part of that. I'm tucking it away.
That is the right way,
Well, I'm tucking it away in case I can get away with it with a client.
Ask if they want to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did a good job of inviting me into that conversation.
Yeah. I'll tell you why if you want to know, or you can just settle with knowing that I think this.
It was a gift.
It is a
Yeah,
gift.
that's amazing.
It's a genuine gift for
Yeah.
sure. I want to shift
Mhm.
gears here a little bit. So, we also like to think about this idea of scaling and growth through the lens of the client journey. So,
Mhm.
I sort of walked through this earlier. If you have a brand story, that's going to help you empower marketing, sales, client experience, and even culture. And all of those elements are essential to nail and master in terms of relational marketing and growth for any kind of relationship-based service firm. So the first thing I would ask you is from a brand story perspective, right, of having a core narrative for a company. I'm curious if there's a story that comes to mind for you from your experience of where you saw that story either being essential to someone's growth or a shift in how they told their story being essential to their scaling and growth.
When I went to my last company, it was an e-commerce logistics company, and it had grown so incredibly fast. It doubled during COVID, like so many e-commerce companies did, and had outgrown systems and processes and capabilities, and started to wobble a little bit like a toddler. And that's where the organization was when I got there, because we were growing so fast and had outgrown some things. And we were really, really working hard on helping our team members understand that not all growth is good growth. We needed to be much more disciplined and intentional, because if we kept just taking on every client, what we were really doing was setting ourselves up for failure. We had to spend some time getting really focused on what are our core competencies? What is it we're best in the world at? How are we going to create value for the client? And what are we going to do to make sure that that promise is never violated? And that's not the case oftentimes in a place of scale or growth. You're just taking on everything, seeing what works, and then you get to a point you go, wow, there's a lot of mess around here. How do I clean this up? And that's a little bit of where we were. One of the stories that comes to mind for me is this client or this prospect that we were working with, who was in love with our brand promise. They were in love with what we did. They had talked to some other clients. They said, "We want to do business with you." And I can remember vividly talking to him, to this day. His name was Jonathan, and he says, "This is what I need. You are my guy. Here's my evaluation matrix. Here's everyone else I'm comparing you to. You're not the cheapest. So let me show you how I've compared you. But you are who I want to do business with, because I believe in what you're doing, and I know that you will be the best for our business." And I was, as the CEO, I would talk to some of our larger prospects and really get involved in that sales process. And what I had to tell him was, Jonathan, I would love to do your business, but I can't. Because if we take your business on, which is not what we are optimally designed to do, here's what I know will happen. I will disappoint you, because we are not designed to do exactly what you need, or I will dilute all of our other capabilities in our organization, because we're trying to pivot and do a good job for you too. So we're going to have to say no. And so I tell that story because I remember my team going, "Oh my God, we're telling a really large client opportunity no." And it was the right thing to do, because we were going to fail. We were going to fail him. We were going to fail our organization. We were going to send the wrong story about what was really important to our team. And I say that because sometimes scaling and being able to cross these chasms in front of us, it's not about saying yes to everything. It's about saying yes to those things that you are exceptionally good at, that will create the most value for the customer you want to serve, and being able to be disciplined enough to say no. And that's a really hard thing to do. I remember wrestling with that particular decision, but it was the right one. And that process of navigating growth and scale is really anchored in your ability to be very clear about the value you create, and very clear on what you will do for a customer and what you will never violate. And if you are clear on that, those decisions don't become easier, but they do become much simpler, because you've already decided in advance who you're going to be, how you're
Yeah.
going to show up, and what you're going to create.
Yeah, that's right. It's never easy. but it's so essential. We talk about that from the language of like the ideal client, right? So we spend a lot of time challenging our clients to dial into who their ideal client really is for every reason you just articulated, right? From a marketing standpoint, it's about clarity. If you try and speak to all people and try to be all things to all people, you'll never be clear to any of them. So that's kind of step one. But what we know behind the scenes is everything you just talked about, that defining your ideal client and those people who you will say yes to and who you want to pursue is actually also going to define the success of your business. Those are going to be the people who they will get the best results and your business will thrive with. So we're taking that long view into the world that you touch on with leaders as we think about those things. But it all comes down to story. Whose story are you going to tell from our vantage point to invite into that journey? And then hopefully you have fewer of those hard conversations than down the road.
And I'm curious too, with the world Matt and I are in, I'm wondering with what you do now and the kind of coaching and support you provide, if everything that you've learned has changed how you talk about marketing with your clients, or if you're ever in a position where you're like, hey, you guys are trying to get your message everywhere and you're diluting, or how, yeah, you approach those conversations.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love the way you asked that because, as a former CMO, like every marketer is an expert marketer, right? And,
Hmm.
and I try to avoid that because I'll tell folks I'm not a marketing expert. But here's what I do know. When we really distill down to the essence of what great marketing is, it's making sure that we have the right and relevant message in front of the right and relevant customer at the right time with the right offer that creates value for them. So they go, oh my God, I cannot see a world without engaging with this business. Well, that means that we have to do the hard work of understanding, to your point, Matt, exactly who our customer is, exactly what problem they're trying to solve, exactly why we are the best in the world at helping them navigate that pain pointer that create the value that they're wanting. Then we have to figure out where they congregate. How do we get our message in front of them? How do we ensure that we're, leading them to the right path that creates value for them? And oftentimes, I'll talk with clients and there's spray and pray. We're testing a lot of things and we're seeing what works and blah, 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 blah. It's like, to what end? To what plan are you trying to do? Like, marketing is the ultimate scientific method in my mindset. Like, we have the warm and the fuzzy and the story, but we test and we learn and we get better, but it's got to be with the applied discipline. And so I hear it from CEOs all the time. And like, I'll ask it. I was on a client with a call with a CEO this morning, like, who's your target audience? What is it they're really trying to solve? Like, you're just selling them features and benefits. You're not talking to them at all about the transformation that they're going to achieve by having gone through your business. That's the story you need them to understand. And I think that from where I sit at a marketing level, it's really just about making sure that my story and their story have an intersection and an intertwine that makes them successful, because that's why they're buying from me.
Yeah.
It's not because they want to serve me. It's so that they can be successful. And so I tend to oversimplify things, but leadership is the same challenge as marketing. Got to make sure everybody understands where we're going, how they fit in, that the same dot connecting. But when I think about great marketing, it's those organizations that make it all about the buyer and figure out, I just can't figure out how to ever survive without them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What about on the sales front? So when we think of that piece of the client journey, I'm curious if there's a story comes to mind there where, as someone was scaling, they had to change their approach to sales, and there's some tweak of the dial that, unblocked them, as you say.
Yeah, I'll tell a personal story. When I show up to do sales calls, first off, I don't like calling it sales. I like calling it service. Like, I'm just going to have a service conversation, because sales is
Love
something
that.
we do to people. At least that's the language. And so I don't like to have a sales call. I like to have a service call. And then we figure out if there's an opportunity for mutual value creation, because I'll show up and say, hey, look, I want to help you. I want to serve you, but it's got to be mutually beneficial. And so I'm thinking of a very specific instance of a CEO who reached out and they were trying to navigate some really big stuff and they needed a catalyst, which is really what I do. Is, from a coaching perspective, I'm much more of a catalyst for change. And they said, I really want to work with you. I said, well, that's great, but what is it you're trying to achieve? Why is it important to you? What do you want to do? I just want you to tell me what I need to do. Well, I'm not going to do that. What do you mean? I said, I'm not just going to tell you what you need to do because you've got to own the solution. You're the CEO of this organization. I work with people who are hungry, humble, and smart, who are ready, willing, and able to look internal first so that they can make the changes they need for themselves and their teams to achieve what it is they want. If you're just looking for a pat answer or a solution, it may or may not work, but it's going to may or may not work based on your capability of execution and implementation. So from a sales perspective, I think about it as not showing up to sell anyone anything, not showing up to do anyone to anything or anything to anyone. It's about education. It's about understanding. It's about connecting the dots. And it's about being able to assess whether or not what I do honestly is going to create value for them. So I sometimes think that the most important sales conversation is not one where I say, would you like to buy from me? It's like, I can see there's a wonderful opportunity here. I'm probably not the best person for you, or our organization doesn't create the value that you need, but I know someone who could be. And so like that really does convey that service mindset, that value creation mindset. And I've had clients who have come back around and said, yeah, I want to work with you. Like, and so those, like, I hear you. Maybe it wasn't the right season. Maybe they weren't in the right space. But those are the types of things when I think about sales, what is the value I'm going to create? How do I serve them? How do I educate? And again, it's back to even what we were talking about at the very beginning. It's not about extracting value from people. It's about creating value for people. And it's got to be mutually beneficial.
Yeah. Geez, I love that. The most powerful reframes are so simple, and I love changing sales to service. That understanding is what made it fun for me. You know, I'm definitely someone who didn't want to do sales, didn't enjoy sales, was fearful of sales early on until that switch flipped somewhere for me. That was like, oh, I just have to show up and help people. Okay, I can do that.
I can do that. Yeah, I had a gentleman on my podcast a few months ago, and he has an incredible sales system. And the beauty of it is that it's not a sales system, it's a service system. It just happens to create sales. Like, oh, okay, I'm just going to pick the phone up and call friends and say, hey, how's it going? Is there anything you're struggling with? Could we provide value here? And so when you get into that mindset of service is selling, sales is an outcome of creating great service, it just becomes this flywheel that really, really spins. And you're right. The simple reframes are the powerful ones. And like, honestly, I have to remind myself of these things every day. It's like, you start, oh, I got a sales call. I got to do all this. Got to ask for the close. I just got to show up and create value.
Yeah.
I think that leads me into another follow-up question for you there, right? You've clearly learned all of these amazing lessons over the course of your career that you apply to your own professional life and in the work that you do with others. And I'm curious, from those lessons and those reframes, what kind of opportunities has that created, either for yourself or for those that you work with?
There's lots. And one of the opportunities that immediately comes to mind is when we move past this idea of transactional and we start really thinking about how do we create relational value. And, I have friends and colleagues and contacts so that I've never sold anything to, but I introduce them to someone else who then introduces, and we create this affinity. And so people want to help people who have helped them. And so the first thing I will often ask when I meet someone is, who do I know that could help you? What is the challenge you're trying to solve for? What is the biggest issue? Oh, I know a guy. I know a gal. Would it be useful if? How could it be helpful for you if I introduce you to this person? And I'll pick the phone up and call that person and say, hey, I know my friend Matt, and he's doing this thing. And would you mind spending 20 minutes like doing that? And they'll do it. And so I think the lessons that I've learned as I've gone through this and the opportunities that have been unlocked have been through the intentional curation of relationships and the ability to connect people together to create value. And ultimately, if they never do business with me, that's totally fine. Right. As mentioned or at the beginning of the podcast, I'm working on a book right now, and it's a book on how leaders can be more impactful in the age of AI. Because like there's tons of noise about AI right now, and it's like, are people going to
I
lose their
want to
jobs?
read that book.
I'll tell you more about it. But somebody, my editor was asking me the other day, like, what is smashing success for you? So smashing success for me is if someone reads this book and makes a change in their leadership behavior based on having read it. They do not have to do business with me. They do not have to ever throw a nickel my way. I don't care. If they make a change in how they show up for another person, that is success. And I'll never know it. And I'm comfortable with that. And so I think when we approach the mindset of that value creation place and relationally, what we really do is create a center of gravity that people want to do business with you because you served them. And so I can think of a dozen relationships in my head now that are clients or have introduced me to clients because I just showed up and did something for them without expecting anything in return.
Dusty, this is so great. Okay, first of all, when you finish the book, you should come back. We'd love for you to come back. Sarah will go nuts talking about that. She loves to talk about AI. We'd love to celebrate that when you're done. I wish we had another hour with you. I think we could just keep going and going. I can't imagine a better guest for a podcast named the CEO's Heart for Service. You just clearly have that in spades. It's clear that anyone who would want to work with you and seeks you out is going to be very fortunate to do so. I would just add, you've been pretty humble about these stories and some of these organizations that you've worked with, but you've worked with some very notable organizations. You have some incredible experience. I encourage people to look that. I won't out that, but I'll encourage people to look that up. The last thing we like to do is, like we said before, if you're going to market in the B2B services space, high stakes, high trust services, we are going to have to not market in a traditional way, but in a relational way. We are going to have to focus on creating human connections with the right target audience. Moments like this in a podcast where people can meet and discover what a wonderful presence you are and how trustworthy you would truly be to guide them, whether it's in a venue like this or a networking event or a keynote or wherever we can create it. But we focus towards that. All of that to say, we like to make sure that people get a chance to meet the human behind the brand. So we have a fun little questionnaire here at the end that we like to go, the Behind the Brand questionnaire. Quick, mostly painless. Are you ready?
I am ready for mostly painless.
All right, I'm going to kick it off. This is my favorite question. What is your go-to karaoke song?
My go-to karaoke song is Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash.
Love it. And also, I feel like you've got kind of the Southern accent to really pull that off.
I can turn it on, especially with the help of a little bourbon.
The deep voice, too. You've got it. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I can hear it.
Dusty, next time we get a chance to talk, we'll talk about $1 Million Quartet, a musical that I was part of developing early on. It's a story of Sun Records in Memphis, and Johnny Cash is a character, and I got to play Sam Phillips in my past life. Now I'm totally out of context. 25 years in theater before I went into marketing for anyone listening. Yeah. Okay. What's the last thing that made you laugh out loud?
My 9-year-old, who's a 9-year-old little boy, doing things that 9-year-old little boys do that involve body sounds and laughter and stupid stuff like that. So he surprised me and caught me unawares in a very with an inappropriate sound that just only a 9-year-old boy can find funny, and it made me laugh. I won't do any of those sound effects for the show. I'm not good at those. But if you have or have ever been around a 9-year-old boy, body functions are really funny, and they can make you laugh in the craziest ways.
All right, next question. What is your favorite way to get away from it all?
My favorite way to get away from it all is to go into the biggest, most open space possible, either with a fly rod or on the back of a horse, hunting or fishing out in the backcountry somewhere where cell phones don't work and no one can reach me, and there's nothing but a giant space and little tiny insignificant me.
Yeah.
That sounds wonderful.
That cowboy game warden vision will not go away.
It's a truism.
Next question. I like this one. What smell reminds you of a specific place or time?
I have this love affair with Thanksgiving. It's my favorite holiday. And it's
Mm.
because we have it's the season between the fall harvest and the Christmas, and it hasn't gotten all quite Christmas chaotic yet, and everybody pauses. So it's the smell of a Thanksgiving feast, and I love to cook, so it starts on like Sunday, and it's just that entire week, and it just brings back so many fond memories for me and growing up, and then also for what I try to do for our family.
That's wonderful.
What is one day in your life that you would like to relive?
It's cliche, but I would love to relive my wedding day because we did it so perfectly and peacefully with no stress and no mess. We eloped, my wife and I, to a little vineyard, and I remember vividly having a quiet coffee at a cafe the morning of, and I would just love to go back to that moment and relive that day.
Sounds wonderful. My fiance and I are planning on eloping because of not wanting to deal with the stress, and that has me even more excited.
I'm 100% in favor of that idea.
Mhm.
Well, now you have an elopement consultant you can go to, Sarah, and ask.
I know. I might have to hit you up.
Go for it. Keep it simple. That's the rule.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah.
Two more questions. The next one is, what 3 words would your loved ones use to describe you?
Intentional, intense, and relentless.
It's good. If you wanted to make it 3 eyes for alliteration's sake, I think you could get away with inspiring if you ever wanted to add that. Just saying.
Thank you. That's actually good. I
Yeah.
didn't even think about that. Maybe I'll come back around.
All right. Last question. What would it mean to have truly succeeded in your work? And not just any companies that you've worked for, but for you personally?
What it will mean, and I've given a lot of thought to this question and think about it quite often. To have been successful in my work means that people that I never have met will have made a different decision and a better decision for themselves or their families because of the fact that I existed, because I had an influence on someone that influenced them. So like that, I'll never know it. And that's the beauty of this question is I have surrendered the need to know the answer to it and simply focus on creating the possibility for it. And that's enough for me.
I really, really love that.
It's
That's
fantastic.
like deeply philosophical, actually, to really think about. I'm going to spend some time thinking on your answer.
I put a lot of thought into that one, late at night and early in the morning.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I do think it's one of the great joys of the similar spaces that we're in is this idea that we get to help people who help people. We get to create ripples of impact and influence that, like you said, we don't necessarily get to see, but we know are out there. Well, we know that you set out and continue to inspire people, and I feel inspired having had the joy to meet you, get to know you, spend this time with you. I feel well served and inspired for the future and feel like I learned a lot. So thank you, Dusty.
You're welcome.
I want to make sure people know how to find you, and I know you've got a cool, actually a really cool offer right now on the table, something you can point people towards.
Sure. Yeah. I love to have conversations. So the best place to do that is, find me on LinkedIn. You can visit just LinkedIn, Dusty Holcomb. It's pretty easy. There's not a lot of us on there. And you can go to our website, arcqusgroup.com, ARCQUS group.com. Tons of resources there, tons of downloads and, podcast stuff and my podcast. The thing that you mentioned that I am so deeply passionate about helping leaders create that clarity so they can lead their teams more impactfully. And this practice that I developed maybe 20 years ago about creating my own leadership rules of engagement, my playbook that I can hand to those that I lead and serve and say, hey, this is a gift for you, a decoder ring, so that you can understand how I think, so that you can manage me more effectively and you can be more successful. So it's not a thing I do about me, it's a thing I do for you. And so what I found is in all my work with leaders, I have companies that now make this a standard practice within their organizations and leadership teams that do this. is that when a leader takes the time to sit down and be very clear about what's important to them, who they are, and how they want to show up, and then they share that conversation with their team, the things happen a lot faster. We remove a lot of friction and waste from our leadership conversations because people aren't guessing about what's important. So if you were to go to myrulesofengagement.com, just that very simple, myrulesofengagement.com, you can download that PDF playbook. You can build your own leadership rules of engagement guide. And as part of it, because of the story that I shared, when I was 23 years old and a bit of a jack, that the DISC assessment that unlocked my own behavioral blind spots, I include that in that guide so that someone can understand their behavior patterns and understand how it's going to influence their leadership. And that's part of that process. So completely free. It's the same. It's a paid report. It's the same one I use with my CEO executives, but I think it's so powerful. And if one person unlocks that capability for themselves, totally worth it.
It's fantastic. I've made a mental note for me to look that up. I think that'll be
Please
great.
do.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. Awesome. So this has been Dusty Holcomb from the Arcqus Group. I'm Matt Wolfe. This is Sarah Pattisall from Brand 3. Now on this end, if you're a B2B service provider, you've struggled with marketing in the past and you find yourself relying on referrals and warm introductions to get by, but you've hit a growth ceiling with that kind of activity, we will show you the pathway that probably no one has shown you yet to how to make marketing work for your specific kind of business, a relational kind of marketing that honors the relationship and trust that you need to earn from your clients. That program is called Scale Beyond Referrals, and there's a workshop you can take to be introduced to that. ScaleBeyondReferrals.com will tell you all about that. But again, Dusty, thank you so much for spending this time with us today. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's delightful. You're quite welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for joining our conversation on how to scale a business without losing its heart. If you found this episode helpful, here are 3 quick ways you can support our podcast and share it with others. First, subscribe to the show here on this platform. Second, leave a review in your podcast app. Your feedback helps other leaders with a heart for service to find this community. And third, share this episode with a B2B leader who's trying to scale their business without compromising the quality of their services. The CEO's Heart for Service is a production of Brand 3. If you're a B2B service provider who delivers exceptional service, but struggles to get your marketing to connect with the right people, find us at brand3.net. And sign up for our Brand 3 newsletter that only sends marketing insights worthy of your inbox. Genuinely helpful stuff for the road ahead. The CEO's Heart for Service is also supported by Forge Podcast Company, a turnkey production solution for using podcasts to reach a wider audience, win new clients, and grow. Find them at forgepodcast.co.